Greetings, everyone. This is Kalei Ross with In Pursuit of Purity. It is my desire to learn as much as I can about chocolate and the chocolate making industry. I would love to share with you what I learn, so I hope you enjoy these videos. Greetings, everyone. This is Kalei Ross with In Pursuit of Purity, and I'm really grateful because today we have a special guest who will be providing us with an immense amount of her personal experience in the chocolate industry. I am joined today by Arcelia Gallardo, who is the founder of Mission Chocolate. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Given your unique background being a farmer's daughter, having such extensive chocolate training and experience in all facets of the industry, I'm curious at what point in your life did you decide, I think I want to pursue a career in chocolate, or were there significant life events that really led you to seriously consider a career in chocolate?
I think that nobody grows up thinking they're going to be a chocolate maker because that's not a real thing. It's like something you see in a movie or a storybook.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think anyone has ever grown up thinking I'm going to be a chocolate maker, right? So I think like most people in the industry, it was just a lot of events that eventually just led to my career choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on to a normal university in Northern California, and I studied marketing. And it wasn't until I had my first job after university that was at a culinary school that I was exposed to the world of food. And so I didn't really think you could have a job in food. I decided it was something you did when you didn't know what else to do or had no other options.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I started to study about real culinary, careers, like actually making a career out of something in the world of food and gastronomy, I just kind of naturally fell into wanting to learn more about pastries and desserts and chocolate. Mm-hmm. But it was really the history of chocolate that drew me in. It was the history of the fruit, the tree, the religious symbolism. Chocolate extended to so much more than just pastry. Like ice cream is good, but it just doesn't have the history that cacao does.
Sure.
And so for me, what really drew me in the end was the cultural history, the economic history, the social history of cacao and chocolate, specifically with Mesoamerican cultures. And so really was that just really drew me in to learn more about chocolate. And then you can't just read about chocolate without wanting to experiment or buy chocolate bars or travel to France and taste chocolate, or travel to Mexico, to Oaxaca to see these chocolate drinks. And so studying the history of the food really led me to want to experiment. And so I started making chocolate at home. I started playing around with bonbons and chocolate drinks and recipes. And so that really led to me wanting to do this every day and for as a career. And so that really was how it started. And many years later, 17 years later, I'm on my second chocolate brand. And I don't see it anytime ending soon. I mean, I have ideas for the rest of my life and possibly, another life when it comes to chocolate products and just chocolate related things that I want to do.
I was really quite amazed because your background history is incredibly extensive, especially when it comes to traveling. It had made reference to you having traveled to, what was it, 23 countries or so, just to study cacao and chocolate making. And, how you went from the quote unquote chic Parisian boutiques to the various communities in the Amazon jungle. What were some of your most impressionistic moments that shaped your thinking? I know you were sharing a little bit about that. Could you be more specific with some of those moments?
Yeah, I think that the most impactful moments are always the ones you don't expect, right? Like the ones that kind of catch you by surprise. So going to Paris and having, a truffle was nice, right? Like it was nice, like it was great. I traveled to Austria to have a chocolate cake, the Sacher torte. That's where it was discovered. And again, that was nice. Like all of these things are really nice to experience, and they're delicious and they're tasty. But it really wasn't until you get involved with people in communities like in Guatemala or
Mm.
Belize or Mexico, where cacao is really like, it equals so many things for them. Like it's their economy, it's culture, it's religion, it's so many things that it just doesn't compare to having a truffle at
Mm.
La Maison du Chocolat in Paris.
Mm.
Although that's nice, there's really no um, soul
Mm.
like that is touched, and it's just very different. So when you go to Guatemala and you go into a community and they spend hours preparing cacao drinks for you, and this is like what they have every day in the morning. This is what the children have as breakfast. Like this is the
Mm.
only, when there are funerals, when you get married, and there's a recipe for every single type of event. Like this
Mm.
is what really becomes impactful, right? Like
Mhm.
although the other things are delicious and they're important in the world and the history of chocolate, they don't really affect you as much as what you see in these communities that are still treating cacao as a gift from the gods.
Wow. I mean, as you describe it, it really illustrates how cacao is a really integral part of life. It can't be separated, it sounds like.
Right, exactly. And depending on what communities you enter, it's either, um, you know, something that you have to drink in order to be healthy, or it's um, something that you have to give in order to be considered a real friend,
Mm.
or it's something that you must, um, you must sell in order to be able to survive. And so
Mhm.
it just means so much more when you travel to communities, to countries where it's been for thousands of years instead
Mhm.
of just a few hundred years.
Right. So you've touched upon something that I'm curious about because, I've spoken with some cacao farmers and they talked about how, if they were able to create their own products that they could sell on their own, that would really help their personal livelihood versus just being the person selling the beans because they're often disconnected in the process. From your own personal history, you've helped a lot of farmers to be equipped to be able to grow and process cacao, quality cacao, and also helping them learn how to create chocolate. What is it that you think that can be done to help replicate what you've done so that more farmers across the globe could be properly equipped in the same fashion?
Well, I think that this new movement of chocolate making, which you can really bundle up as bean to bar chocolate or craft chocolate making, I think that a lot of the chocolate makers are already doing that because it's kind of like a catch 22. Like chocolate makers don't want to buy badly processed cacao, but
Mhm.
a farmer doesn't know how to process cacao unless a chocolate maker teaches them what is great processed cacao. And
Right.
so a lot of the people that are making really good chocolate have already been spending the time and continue to spend the time with farmers because that's the only way that they're going to understand what does it mean to have good cacao. So a lot
Mhm.
of people have already been doing this because they need great cacao. If I do not have great cacao, I cannot make great chocolate. Like that's just
Mhm.
the bottom line. And so so the way that people are helping or can help is you buy cocoa. And sometimes the cocoa isn't great, but it gives the farmer the incentive
Mm.
to do better because the farmer needs a commitment from you, right?
Mhm.
And so if they're going to stop selling to whoever they're selling to, they need you to be able to buy it, whether it's great or not. But you don't want to buy bad cacao. So then you need to work closely with them to make sure that they're producing the best cacao that they can. And
Mhm.
so that's one way to do it. Most of the work that I do in indigenous communities is volunteer work. So I don't have a contract in terms of buying cocoa from them because they're still too tiny, and most of them don't even produce cocoa to sell. Like most of
Mm.
the work that I do in these communities are to teach women to work with the little amount of cacao that they have so that they can sell it to make. So it's essentially creating micro businesses. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not me trying to get them to sell to Guitar or Dandelion or
Mm-hmm.
any of the big guys, because they just don't have it. Like we're talking about a family that has some trees in their backyard, and this is what they do to make a little bit of income.
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, people can travel and help these communities, but they're not that easy to find. And I think that I have an upper hand because I'm a woman. And a lot of these indigenous communities, it's the women that process the cocoa. And um, it's really complicated for a man to step into these communities and say, I'm going to work with these women for a week or whatever. It's culturally, it's just not something that they accept or that they like.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's very easy to come in as a woman and be able to help and work with them for a week. Maybe they house me for a week. So it's just a very safe situation. And also, I speak Spanish and I speak Portuguese. And so, again, like for me to come into these communities, it's a lot easier than someone who doesn't speak the language and usually is male.
Mm-hmm.
So, definitely a lot easier for women to be able to do this as well.
You obviously are well traveled, well spoken. You are very knowledgeable about the different cultures and different countries. So I can't help but wonder, what was it about Brazil that attracted you so much that you wanted to actually establish a chocolate factory there?
Well, so Brazil is really special in a lot of ways, like more ways than people can imagine. So number one, Brazil was the number one producer of cocoa in the world up to the 1990s, when they were struck by a disease on the farms. And then at that time, Africa took over as the lead producer of cocoa. So now we all know Africa as the major
Mm-hmm.
producer of cocoa in the world, but up until the 1990s, it was Brazil. So imagine being in one country, and we're talking about Africa as a continent, right? We're not talking about just one country.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Brazil used to be the one country that was leading the production of cocoa in the world. So there's a lot of cocoa in Brazil, and so there was a lot of room for me to play around. And then Brazil also borders many other countries. So we have profiles that mimic those other countries. So you can have like a Venezuelan profile, Peruvian profile, an Ecuadorian profile, a Bolivian profile, and then there is like the Brazilian profile. And so there is a lot of room for you to actually play around. There's also a lot of varieties of cocoa that are undiscovered.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go into the Amazon and find varieties of cocoa that no one has ever processed or made into chocolate. Um, and then Brazil also, specifically Sao Paulo, is it's a major city. It's a metropolis. Where I live in the city, there's 20 million people. And so it has a really strong consuming culture. So
Mm-hmm.
for me to be able to make a high-end product, a craft product, gourmet product, and be able to sell it in a country at a higher value, Sao Paulo in Latin America is the only country where that can happen. I could make great chocolate in Guatemala, but I can't sell it at a premium because the market is just not there, or Panama or El Salvador. It's just not going to happen. Whereas Sao Paulo has some of the best restaurants in the world. So the culture of spending um, for great experiences, whether it be gastronomic or otherwise, is in Sao Paulo. And so if I was going to be able to produce a premium product and sell it at a premium price, the consumers here would be open to it. And they are. So access to cacao and access to a market, that really were like the two main things. And also, and then access to a lot of different types of cacao. And so it's been interesting being here, because one thing that I didn't know was that most of Sao Paulo is actually of Italian descendancy. And then the other portion is Japanese. And so some of the best pizza and gelato I've ever had in my life, even within Italy, has been in Sao Paulo. So I've never been to Japan, but I know that, but I've had really top-notch Japanese food in the US. And again, some of the best Japanese food I've had has been here in Sao Paulo. So it's very interesting to be able to be in a city that really values high quality food, and
Yeah.
therefore has space for these high quality chocolates that are coming out.
That's amazing. I mean, that's something I certainly wouldn't have expected from Brazil as far
Right.
as
Yeah.
the mix of cultures there.
Yeah, I agree. It was a surprise for me as well.
So you talked about the various types of cacao that you have access to there. Is that what has helped to inspire you with your diverse range of bars, as well as some of the artwork associated with your wrappers?
Yeah, I think that before I moved to Brazil, I was making chocolate with dandelion chocolate, and they had a very specific recipe to follow, and they were purist. There was only cacao and sugar. You can't put anything else in this chocolate. And so that's how I learned to make chocolate. So when I moved
Mhm.
here, that's what I wanted to do. But when you're living in a country that produces cocoa, you really don't have access to import cocoa from any other country. So if you're producing country in Indonesia, your chocolates are going to be cacao from Indonesia. If you're producing chocolate in Peru, your cacao is going to be from Peru. And so in that sense, it's very complicated to compare yourself with chocolate makers that are in Europe and in the US, because they
Mhm.
have access to everything. So they can
Right.
have a bar from Belize, a bar from Ecuador, a bar from Venezuela, a bar, from Madagascar, whereas anyone producing chocolate in their own country has to stick to their own cocoa.
Mhm.
And so at that moment, I realized, wait, I can't compete internationally with all these big brands if I'm trying to do the same thing they are, but just maybe changing farms or producers, because it's not going to give me the array of profiles that they have. And
Mhm.
so if I'm going to stick out, if I'm going to be special, I have to do what is special to where I am, which is Brazil. What makes Brazil special is all of the ingredients and nuts and fruits that nobody has ever heard of or has definitely not introduced into chocolate. And so I started to research what makes Brazil special in terms of their ingredients. And I found that there were a lot of fruits and vegetables that were very responsibly sourced, that really fell under a category of responsibly sourced, processed by cooperatives and families, grew wild, tasted great, and were easily accessible for me to receive here in Sao Paulo. And
Mhm.
so I started using those ingredients in my chocolate. And
Mhm.
when I started taking them to festivals in the US and in Europe, people just went crazy for them. And so even though my booth was next to Dandelion, we had nothing in common, right? Because I wasn't trying to sell the same recipe that Dandelion was selling.
Mhm.
I was selling all of these exotic fruits and nuts in chocolate. And
Mhm.
so it really made me stand out, but also it it really changed the way that we started to see chocolate in Brazil.
Yeah.
Because before it was always, let's copy Europeans, like let's
Mm.
make chocolate the style of the Italians, because Italian culture is so huge here in Sao Paulo. Everyone wanted to mimic Italian chocolate makers, or everyone wanted to mimic Belgian chocolate,
Mhm.
or even American chocolate. And so what started to happen was like, no, like let's make Brazilian chocolate. And that meant highlighting Brazilian flavors, not hazelnuts, even though hazelnuts are amazing. They're not Brazilian. Like, let's
Mhm.
focus on something that's Brazilian. Like, I'm going to say things you've never heard about. So like the baru nut is a nut that's only in Brazil. It's um, kind of in between like a peanut, but it grows on a tree and it's hard like an almond. And then there is a umbu fruit, which is like a green plum. But when you cook it, it tastes like a very bright acidic licorice, a black
Mm.
licorice.
Mhm.
There is cupuaçu, which is a cousin to cacao, but tastes like pineapple
Mm.
and passion fruit and like a ripe banana all in one. So there's
Wow.
so many things that we have here that we thought, no, like let's stop with the hazelnuts and let's do all of these things that we have that the world has never had. And that's
Mhm.
really what set my brand apart. And my packaging, that's the idea behind it. It's like, let's make the packaging look like nature, or like these things where all of my ingredients come from.
Yeah, you certainly have beautiful packaging to go along with the beautiful chocolate
Thank
within.
you.
Given that you have so much experience in the industry, what is it that you would advise anyone that is interested in pursuing a career in the chocolate industry?
So when I started being interested in making chocolate, I studied from everyone. So I teach chocolate making classes, and a lot of people come to me as like their first teacher. And I always tell them, you need to study with everyone. Like, you're not going to learn everything from me because I don't know everything. And I highly suggest for people to read every book there is on making chocolate. There isn't one book that's the best. Read all of them, because you're going to gather small ideas from all of the different people. And so I took classes with Chloe, which is like, I don't know if I need to say her last name, but Chloe wrote the little pink book on like how to taste chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to Venezuela with her for 2 weeks to learn about
Wow.
Venezuelan cacao and making chocolate there. John Nancy has a course on roasting cocoa, so right, had that course. I studied with several other chocolatiers on working with chocolate, like bonbons and bars, and so maybe the product after you have your chocolate. And I traveled to Ecuador to understand about processing cocoa there. So there isn't one place or one school or one teacher or one class that you can take to understand this. And so you have to do it with everyone, and over a few years. You're not going to be good after 1 year. It takes several years. So don't be sad when you make your first batch of chocolate and it's horrible. It's supposed to be horrible because you're not a chocolate maker, right? Like, if anyone could just make a batch of chocolate and it's great the first time, and every time you do it, then there's really no art and skill to it. The idea is you're supposed to get good. You're supposed to be bad in the beginning, learn a lot, get good, and then that's when you start your career of selling the chocolate, right?
Right.
And so you don't be sad if it takes a while for you to learn it. That's the point. Like, it's not worth it if it doesn't take hard work and time to learn it.
Yeah. Thank you for that bit of encouragement. I know that obviously with COVID, that has really changed the way we think about the future. But nevertheless, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what you would like to see for the future of Mission Chocolate, as well as any other projects that are coming to mind that you just have to get your hands into at some point in the future.
Yeah, I've always been very excited about teaching. So that's really my love. Is I love making chocolate, I really do, but I also love teaching people to make chocolate and to be better at their craft. And so along those lines, I wanted to create kind of like a school, but rather like a school museum where you can come learn about chocolate. It doesn't necessarily have to be a class, but you'll be able to come inside this space, this museum really, and learn about the history of chocolate, how chocolate is made. And then along those lines, also create programs where I can take students or people to indigenous communities so that they can teach them about making chocolate. But then I can also bring farmers and women from indigenous communities to this museum or school so that they could teach what they know as well. Because I think that there is a gap in the knowledge that chocolate makers have in the US and in Europe, because drinking chocolate has been what chocolate has been most of our time, as a species, as humans. Like, it's been drinking chocolate. And a lot of people forget that. And I think that we need to return a little bit backwards and get back to drinking chocolate, which is healthy. Like, we view chocolate as junk food, as unhealthy, as candy, and it hasn't been that for that long. It's that now. But I would like to go a little bit back in time and bring these indigenous women and people and farmers to teach us that again, like how to create these recipes, ancient recipes that have been passed down generation and are not written in books.
Well, that would be an amazing way for us as people to sustain and maintain this amazing culture that has already been
Yeah,
put into motion.
yeah, I agree.
Well, as our interview time comes to an end, what is it that you would like viewers to take from our time together?
I'm a pretty big proponent of drink your chocolate. Uh, I eat chocolate every day. There's no doubt about that. I really do. But I start every single morning, and sometimes my afternoon tea is chocolate. I drink chocolate, and you have to learn to drink it without sugar because there's so much power and energy in that drink, but you have to get rid of the noise. You have to get rid of the other stuff that's there.
Hmm.
And it takes time. It has taken me years to learn how to drink chocolate without sugar. And you may have experiences maybe with tea or coffee. Like if you're used to drinking coffee with sugar and one day you don't, you're just like, wow, this is the worst thing I have ever tasted. So it's that same thing. You have to reduce a little bit at a time until you're at zero. And I'm not saying you have to drink it that way. What I'm saying is experience it so that you
Hmm.
understand what it is, because it is a totally different high or feeling that you get from just drinking cacao.
Hmm.
And of course, it has to be good cacao. Like it can't just, if the worse the cacao is, the worse the drink is going to taste. So it has to be
Hmm.
the best quality cacao that you can have get your hands on.
Hmm.
um, it really becomes a different experience altogether. And in water also, not in milk.
Hmm.
So that's my challenge I would like to leave with everyone.
Well, I'd like to accept that challenge.
Try it, try it.
Most definitely. Well, thank you so much, Arcelia. This has been a great time of learning about your own personal history and how that's been influenced by all this history of cacao and in essence influencing us.
Yeah, and anything you need, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, my website, TikTok recently. So send me a message and let me know what you think if you try the drink.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.